So, welcome to our final session. And I think I might be correct when I say it's the funnest session because it's actually art-centered and creative activity for those of us who are able to follow along with Pieper. Pieper, I'll let you provide some background. I know we had the opportunity to see a wonderful video that you provided about the work that you do, and I'm excited to learn about how you apply your work in an elder facility. And so I'll let you take it from there. I just admired your work for so long, and also I'm curious to find out if you are available for some of our communities in South Dakota to bring you in to use you in Art for Life.
Well, 2023 would be the earliest that I would be available for anything. I think I'm booked right now through at least spring for sure. So yes, thank you everybody for participating in this, and thank you for asking me. I'm hope that I can give a little bit of insight into how I've translated my artwork into an Art for Life activity. That's kind of the biggest challenge, I think, it was for me when I started, and I've been part of the Art for Life program here in North Dakota pretty much since its inception, I think, well over a decade ago. And I nearly quit after the first year or two because I just thought it was way too challenging. I thought the expectation was that I would be teaching elders how to do rose mauling and Swedish doll mauling, and that was what I tried to do actually, and that was just a disaster. That isn't at all the focus of Art for Life. That wasn't our focus at all, and I really had to do some soul searching and practice and trial and error in coming up with something that would still kind of meet the needs that I had, which was wanting to bring to awareness some of the imagery of Scandinavian heritage, and then also just paint with people, just bring something new to elders in our elder care facilities, something that breaks up their day, something that makes them not, the three plagues, helplessness, loneliness, and boredom. We want to combat those. And it took me a long time to realize that it really wasn't product based, it's process based. And so I'm going to just go through a little bit of a PowerPoint first with some slides to just kind of show sort of the process that I went through, and to kind of familiarize some of you with what the Swedish folk art is. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because that's a lecture for another day, but just so that you have a little bit of background. The two paintings behind me are examples of my work, and that's called Swedish doll molding, and we'll get to that in just a second. So I think what we'll do first is we'll start with a slideshow, and then I'll talk about a few things, and then we'll do demonstration then at the end. Okay, so let me take my glasses off so I can see my screen. So give me just a second so I can share my screen. And okay, so I hope that looks pretty good there. So we're calling this Art for Life, the artist experience, because this was my experience as an artist going into elder care facilities. My background also is that I'm an oncology nurse, and so I'm pretty accustomed to working with an older population, and as nurses in the inpatient side and then also at the cancer center, we do get a lot of training on educating people from different demographics, including elders, different things that we need to do when we're focusing on education just for healthcare, how to lower your voice and how to look people in the eye, and a lot of those things that many of you may already be quite aware of, but perhaps you're not, especially if there are artists here who have not worked with elders before. Those are things that maybe aren't as intuitive as I always kind of thought they were. But so this particular slide, the piece across the top, is a piece that I just completed last spring with Mary Hill Manor in Enderlin, North Dakota. And I'll have a little bit of close-ups of this piece as we move later on. But that's probably the biggest community project I've done with elders. And it was fantastic. I really thought it went very well. I hope that the folks at Enderlin thought that it went very well. We used egg tempera. That was the first time I'd done that with elders. And it was great, I thought. So here's what we're going to go through first. We'll speak just a little bit about the Swedish folk art imagery, the Swedish folk painting, the type of art that I do, which is called bonadsmålning and dolmålning. And I only put this slide here so you can see those words, because if I say them out loud, people are like, what? What are those words? What does that even mean? So we'll get to that in a second. And then we'll talk about the way my voice and my art in this Swedish style, and then how I translated that to Art for Life activities, the challenges and accommodations that I needed to come up with, and then we'll do a demo. So about me, just briefly, I'm born and raised in Minnesota, lived in a very small town, Regal, Minnesota, population 44, centrally located. Like many people who grew up in a rural upper Midwest, I think whether we are people that are native to this land or we're descendants of immigrants, I think because of our geography and the isolation that we sometimes experience, I think our heritage has just kind of stuck with those families. And I think we've continued to live our heritage, whether we realize it or not. And sometimes I think when it comes to heritage, it's just identifying what it is in your culture and in your behavior are part of your heritage. And most people don't even really realize this, but we are surrounded by imagery and tradition and food and behaviors all the time that are part of our heritage, whether we realize it or not. So I moved to North Dakota. I've been up in Grand Forks now for about 23 years, and have been active with the North Dakota Council on the Arts for most of those, both as an apprentice and as a master artist. And then once Troy Geist found out that I was a nurse and an oncology nurse and dealt with elders, it was just a natural fit to pull me into the Art for Life program. And as I said, after a couple of struggles, I think we've got some methodology and figured out. So this is what I was talking about, some of the imagery and things that were just around our home that I didn't even realize were Swedish. So the coffee pot, which, many people may find that to be familiar, and these tiles and the Dala horse. And it wasn't until I started studying Swedish folk art that I realized where some of this imagery came from. Here, let's go back. So this piece off to the right, that is an old painting on a wall of a home. And this is called dolmålning, and it's from the northern central part of Sweden. That flower form is called a kurbits, Kurbits. And it's that kurbits flower form that is pretty prominently featured when we look at our tablecloths and pot holders and things. When you go to an import store and a Scandinavian store, you see kurbits on all the cookie packaging and things like that. So that's the type of art I'm emulating. And this is what they would historically have looked like in the home. So these were painted wallpaper, either done on linen or canvas or paper, and then affixed to the walls of peasant class homes. So this was not upper class, it wasn't manor homes, it wasn't any of this. They were storytelling, and much of it was biblical, but there were a lot of allegorical stories. There was a lot of royalty, especially when there was a new king. There would be the new face of the king, a lot of Napoleonic war type things, news of the day, and then just activities from daily life. And these would be put in the special celebration room if it was a 2-room home, where they could have like a good living room, where that's where they celebrated weddings and feast days and Christmas. And then in the southern part of Sweden, that's where you see the bonadsmålning. Those are a little bit darker and denser, and those were only hung temporarily on a special day and then taken down the rest of the year. So this was the way they dressed their home at Christmas time. So I use imagery from both of these things. The kurbits flower, which we see there on the left, that great big stalk of flowers that hangs over in midair, lots of borders. The bonadsmålning on the right, again, storytelling, but there's a lot of decorative elements and fillers and little circle clouds and things like that that are present. So I incorporate all of that imagery in my own work. And then that's what I try to incorporate a little bit of when I am working in elder care. So this is another picture of one of these close up. You have the kurbits flowers, which are growing in urns on either side. This is just a picture narrative of here you see a shoemaker's workstation. Script across the top generally, and lots of borders and frames. And these are bonadsmålings from southern Sweden. No Kurbit's flower here in these, but rather there are lots of these little cloud, drapery cloud-like things all along the top of the paintings. And then there's little filler clouds, and then little filler flowers kind of in between all the horse's legs. And this is a story across the top of a man going to market. And I think he met somebody else on a horse and they were going to trade horses. And then he got into a fight and did some other things. And I just think these stories are just hysterical and charming, actually. And maybe that's why I find I'm so taken with them. So then my translation, so now that you have a background of what the Swedish folk art is, my translation is that I tell modern day stories, but I use some of those same imageries, and I've been using traditional materials these days. My work is much more intricate than a lot of the other old painters, and this is the painting of my hometown of Regal that I did in 2018. This is acrylic on canvas, and it's 3 canvases. It stands 3 feet tall and a total of 6 feet wide. And there's script across the top that reads, "When we were young, Lintonville became Regal, named after Mr. Widener's new Buick. Buildings stood where now there are none, and new ones built in once plowed fields. These were days of pancake breakfast, smelt fries, a baseball championship, and the magical light of a beer sign showing moving sky blue waters and a campfire. Oh, how I wanted to live in that enchanted little tent." And that last line refers to the Ham's beer sign that hung in my dad's bar at this little town of 44 people. And here's some close-ups of this. We have the schoolhouse. I went to a one-room schoolhouse, grades 1 and 2, before they closed all of them in the state of Minnesota. And then the church. And then I put little subscript, which was common in the old Swedish paintings. Our tongues stuck to the metal railing in the winter outside of the church, because that's where everybody in town got initiated to that terrible thing. And the teeter-totter. And then this was some of the other buildings in town. My dad's bar, which is front and below. And we had 2 barns in town. And there's a line of people outside of my dad's bar and grill, because he did have quite a few people come through, like on a Wednesday night rib buffet. We'd bring in about 600 people on a Wednesday in the summer. It was a resort area. So, and Johnny Cash did come and play in town once. One of the farmers hired him to come and play. So, oh, and we used to play by the river. The river was a little bit out of town. We would always have to send a sentinel kid down on a bike to see if the cows and the bull were out, because it was in a pasture. So if the cows were there, we could not go swimming that day. But if the kid on the bike came back and said all clear, then all this little pack of kids that ranged in ages would all head down to the river, and the older ones would hold up the barbed wire fence for the little ones to crawl through. But we always had to watch for the bull and make sure that wasn't out. So this is my translation. It's my own modern stories, but I'm using the imagery. There was the Kurbit's flower there in the center, and then I have Kurbit's in the urn on either side, multiple borders, a lot of these things. So at first I really wanted to incorporate all of these things when I was doing Art for Life activities, and I realized that just really needs to get scaled back quite a bit. Oh, and here's the Ham's beer sign that was in my dad's bar. I painted it in the little bar. I don't know if anybody grew up in, rural upper Midwest. If you had a cafe or a bar in town, you had this Ham's beer sign in the 70s. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but oh, how I wanted to live in that enchanted little tent, for sure. And then I'm going to just show another storytelling piece that I did last year. This was at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. This one's called Silver Linings, and this was all done with egg tempera, and it's quite large. I think it stands like 40 some inches and is about 60 some inches wide on raw linen. And this is it in its entirety. And this is a southern Swedish bonadsmåling. So no Kurbits, but lots of little circle clouds, little fillers, the script that runs throughout. And the bonadsmåling told their stories almost like a comic strip, lots of little squares. And so the top panel here talks about, well, the words are pandemic spring, North Dakota. We joined together while staying apart, making masks, cutting hearts, bringing poetry, music, and color to our elders, tending things that grow, distributing essentials, and showing quiet love through a window, grateful for a glimpse. And this was about how many of the artists in North Dakota, many of them who work through Art for Life, kind of came together in our state and were doing things in our local communities to help bring people together in safe ways. So to try to keep that connection, even though we were all separated and isolated. The panel across the top pretty much just displays the USDA food box program, where the hospitality industry was hit so bad that I think they were taking trucks and bringing food from farms to redistribution sites and then distributing those to families. The center panel, I have artists and musicians on both the left and right that kind of got together with their communities and with their local churches to try to see what they could do to continue having church service. On the left, the Waddington brothers set up a transmitter, and they played live music and had live church service outside of church on Easter Sunday, but they had it on a transmitter so people could sit in their cars and listen to it on the radio. And so I thought that was something that's really very important. It's a way to join people together while they still had to stay apart. And that was a lot of things that artists in our state were doing during the early days of the pandemic. I've got essential workers on that panel as well as the making masks and cutting hearts. And then the whole bottom panel deals with elder care and healthcare facilities. So artists that went and did courtyard concerts, painting on the windows, chalk drawings outside of the windows. There were some people that spoke to elders through the window and helped them write poetry based on stories, and then hallway bingo, of course. So I'm just going to show a couple of close-ups. Here's the making of masks. And so this is egg tempera with some of the traditional flower designs that belong to this type of artwork. And so this is my translation of the old Swedish bonadsmålning. Hallway bingo, those activity directors, good grief. What a bunch of hard workers, with or without a pandemic. And then I included this particular sequence because while I was doing this painting, actually my husband's mother was sick when they were in Texas. And then at the very beginning of the pandemic, when they were shutting down flights, she hightailed it home and ended up in the hospital in St. Cloud, Minnesota, where she eventually ended up dying after her illness and in isolation the entire time. And so that was pretty horrific experience. And the day they moved her to a ground floor was the first time Mike had seen his mom for, well, they had spent the whole winter, so it was several months. And when we came around the corner to go look at her through the window, this was the pictures that I took. I just saw these families sitting at these windows, and all I could think of was how much love is at these windows and what a barrier a window can be, yet it's not. It's the only non-barrier that we had, really. So in a way, that's kind of a weird symbolism, I thought. So here's how I translate all of this stuff. You know, you look at this and go, how can you possibly teach any of this to elders in nursing homes? And honestly, you can't. I learned that very quickly. Shaky eye, bad eyesight, shaky hands is really, really difficult to, and no memory from what happened maybe an hour ago. These are things that I really could not find a way to do that. And so what we did instead was we just really pulled it way, way back. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I don't know what artists are on today and what your art is, but this is, I think, important to think out of the box when you may be approached to come in to a facility and be asked to do this, to really think out of the box. And it's not really about you doing your art with people.
Pieper,
I feel I'm just a vehicle, you know. So
Pieper, you asked about what artists are on, and we do have Judy Larson here, and she mentions that she was featured
She
as an
was.
accordion player and how meaningful
She
that
was.
is.
There she is on the very far right. Yes, of the middle panel. She was one of the artists in North Dakota that that helped her local pastor create a way to broadcast their church services, I think streamed somehow from a little shed that she set up or one of her outbuildings with her newfound accordion skills. Congratulations and thank you, Judy. So yeah. So the way I ended up translating this was I create very simple imagery that is Scandinavian or imagery that will spark a story. So somebody hand milking a cow, somebody feeding chickens, someone on a tractor, any of those kind of coloring book imageries that will spark conversation. And that is an important thing when you're sitting with a group of people painting, because all it really takes is, here, do you want to paint this picture of this woman hand milking a cow? Did any of you guys ever have to hand milk the cows? And before long, maybe nobody's painting, but we're all talking about chores on the farm. And the bottom line is the bottom line really for them to create a work of art? No, the bottom line here is to do something today that is going to decrease their boredom and to decrease their loneliness and to make them not feel helpless. And sometimes that means just leaving your isolation and joining others in conversation where maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. And so I think sparking conversation and just having visit time is very important to incorporate in the painting activities that I do. So this is a very simplified activity that I have here. I create canvas boards with almost Mod Podged like coloring book images, and then I help guide residents through painting them. And then I will, as you can see here, the colored version, the flowers in the corner, that's my embellishment. I just will sometimes, if I've got time, depending on how many people are painting with me, I will ask if they want me to embellish it or write their name on the bottom or something like that, just to add a little bit of fun feature to it. And usually people really enjoy that because sometimes they just want to watch me paint too. And it's kind of fun to do that. Stick with something very simple. Individual projects, I would say I don't go much bigger than a 5x7 or an 8x10. The 5x7 is where everybody wants to start. If I give them a 5x7 or an 8x10 canvas, they're going to go straight for the 5x7. Why? It's small, it's little. I can't do this. I've never done this before. I don't know how to paint. I better just start with something small. I don't want to wreck your stuff. So I don't go much bigger than that. And also, if you do go much bigger, you're going to run out of time and people get tired. About an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours is pushing it for a painting activity. So, and when I make these canvases, I do them one of two ways, and I'm going to demonstrate one way here in just a minute. The picture here on the left, this was one that I painted on the spot for somebody. She just wanted a flower and she wanted it very big, and she only wanted about 6 or 7 areas to paint. So I, with a black paintbrush, painted on this flower on the canvas, and then she painted it in. And then I helped her clean up the edges a little bit. And then the pieces on the right are pieces that I had prepared the canvas ahead of time, and then we did sort of a paint by number activity. So those are individual projects. So this type of thing is when I go in, I would do a painting activity with a group of people, and everybody gets to paint on their own 1 or 2 projects. And if they have time to get through 3, if they want to come back in the afternoon and work on a 3rd one, they can. But these are all individual projects. I've used sort of this same process to do community piece. This is one that I did a couple years ago in Langdon in Maple Manor. This canvas is 12 feet tall or 12 inches tall by 36 inches wide. So it's 3 feet wide. And I chose this very long horizontal type of canvas, and it's just a pre-primed canvas I got at Michael's. I think it was $7 or something like that. And I chose that because it can lay flat on a table in front of two people that are pulled up to a table if they're both happen to be in wheelchairs. I think with an older population, it's hard for them to reach forward in front of them. So to have to reach and paint something way at the top of a picture, if that picture were vertically pretty tall, if it were more than 12 inches, they'd have to reach very far in front of them to the opposite side of the table. And that's very difficult for some people. So I think it's important, whatever the project is, to kind of keep it kind of close in where they can reach just a couple of inches out from that beginning of the table to the center. So something that is not very high, but can be very wide is great, because you can set that down in front of two people, maybe even three, depending on how we're distancing each other these days. And two people can be working on this at the same time. One can be working on one side and one can be working on the left side, one can be working on the right side. And then after, it's important, I think, to rotate, let those two people work on it for, say 20 minutes, or maybe somebody just wants to paint the chicken and then they're done. Then you can easily pick that piece up and walk it down to the other side of the room and have it be in front of two other people. And then they can work on that, and it can rotate around the room. So I'll show you how I did this. That piece, I did not take a picture. I regret it so much. I didn't take a picture of it at the onset. That piece, I drew out the sketch and transferred it onto the canvas and outlined everything in black, so it would have looked just like a coloring book. And then I let residents paint it. Now the coloring book image, or cartoon, I guess I'll call it, I kept that very simple. I did not add hardly any extras. So what you see here on the left is what it looked like when the residents were finished painting on it. So if you look here, like even if you look at this little yellow triangle that's at the top of the hill, this kind of little field I've got with some trees. So all I did here was I included just this little area of triangle. The trees are just a trunk and circles. And these clouds were just circles and oblong type shapes. And then if you look at the picture over on the right, this were the decorations and embellishments that I added in after the elders were done painting. This was done over a 2 or 3 day residency. And I took the final day and I went along and cleaned up a lot of the edges. So you can kind of see these little leaves here. I don't know, can you see my arrow moving when I do this? I think you guys can.
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah. So the little tips of the leaves, somebody was tired and kind of went outside the lines. And that's always a big fear. I'm going to go outside the lines. Don't worry about that. I'll come through and get all the edges cleaned up. I mean, do your best so I don't have to go through all the work. But, people are pretty nervous about going outside the line. So I try to encourage them to just go for it anyway. And that's always a big deterrent. But then I went through and added the embellishments. So this little triangle of yellow, I added the little black scallops. I added these little lines that kind of came across here on the field. I added the little white highlights, and I think I might have added a little wash of blue over these clouds so they didn't look quite so gray. And then if you look at this blue, the goat and the blue flower, the goat, I just did an outline of a goat, and there was somebody that painted it in. A little bit of direction from me, I think, because I kind of gave them a little bit of 2 different colors of white at that point. And then I went in and added all of the details afterwards. And this is something that they painted on and they helped create, and it actually ended up looking quite charming. And of course, the topic was very pertinent. I mean, it's all North Dakota. We shall show gratitude for the land and animals. The only thing that got some comments was, what color do you make the tractor, right? Is it a red tractor or a green tractor? Because them's fighting words is what somebody told me. So I did that on purpose, because that's engagement and conversation, and we need to have, that's something that you want to, I kind of try to feed into that a little bit because I think it's fun. And this was the day that I sat and painted all of the embellishments and the details. And I did it in a public area at the coffee shop at Maple Manor. And I tried to put myself in a public area, either right outside the chapel or right outside where people would be coming and going, so that they could stop and watch. And I had several groupies that would just sit and, pull their chairs up close so they could watch what I was doing and offer some suggestions, or I would ask for suggestions too. But that's also a very fun part of the residency. When I was there for 3 days, I ran a couple of art activities, but in the downtime, I was sitting in a public space just painting on either my own work or embellishing their work for them. And that's very engaging. That's a very engaging activity for them. So some of the physical challenges that need to be addressed when you're working on these. And so this is another close-up of, just so you can see what it looked like when the residents were done working on it here, and then what it looked like when I finished the work. So when I do these projects, it's labor intensive on my part. I prepare the canvas ahead of time, and I've got some work to do after the fact. But during the time that they are painting, I'm not sitting next to them, holding their hand or threading the bead for them or doing anything. I get their painting station set up and let them go. And I think that's the part that is very appreciated by the activity directors that I've worked with is I try to make it so that once we get an elder started going, they feel comfortable going off onto their own so that I can circle the room and check in on everybody else. It's not something where you need to have someone sitting right next to them every minute. So the physical challenges that I needed to figure out how I was going to deal with were eyesight, hearing, dealing with fine motor skills, and decision-making, which was one that kind of caught me off guard. So eyesight with elder population, the do's and don'ts. The first thing I realized was all of my beautiful muted colors that I use for Swedish doll mauling and rose mauling had to go out the window because they're just not, people's eyes change as they get older. Bright colors are much easier to see and much more pleasant. And I noticed that people just grabbed the bright pink right away, or the bright blue. Navy blue is hard to see. It looks brown, it looks black, it looks green. Mustard yellows are a touchy. If it gets to be too much like a sienna or an ochre, a mustard color, it just starts to look brown. It doesn't look yellow. And I find most people want yellow. And so we go more with like a cadmium yellow or bright yellow. Red is a fun color, but it's also a difficult color to use. It's very transparent. So I have to be a little picky about my reds that I use. The other thing is bold outlines. So black outlining pretty much. And I tend to go kind of a light brown outline because I don't really want to see the line work. And I really had to tell myself that was not going to be possible. I think older eyes need to see the line work, and black and bold is how that happens. And incorporating large painting spaces. So too many tiny little places are hard for brushes to manipulate into. Keep the painting spaces big. And then you can add smaller details on. Me, the artist, can add smaller details on at the end. As I embellish, I can add the small details on. Or I can teach them how to put dots on, and we'll get to that in a sec. And then leaving a lot of empty space initially. So on these small individual projects, I have just the pattern that's on the canvas, and that's all. When I do a big community project, I don't add lots of details or scripting or any of that kind of stuff until after elders have painted on it. Then I put all of that on because I don't want it to get confusing. And I'll show you what I mean when I get to the Enderlin piece. So avoid muted earth tones. I think they all end up looking the same. Brown looks like green, looks like navy blue, looks like golden yellow. Brighter colors are better. Faint or intricate lines are difficult to see with anybody who has blurred vision or double vision. extra embellishments and clutter and script initially, kind of avoid that, add that on later. And shiny surfaces are hard because of the glare. So I finish off these canvases with a coat of varnish, and I use a matte varnish, not a shiny varnish. And I rough it up with a fine sandpaper too, even to make it even more matte. Fine motor skills, how do you deal with that when you're painting? A couple of things. If you can get large handled brushes, those work nice. I have gotten some for nursing homes through the supply list if I've gotten a grant for them. And something even like this is good compared to, you know, something that's pretty thin. This is even a little bit thicker. I don't know if you can see those. The thicker is easier. You can even get those comfort grips, and those are really nice. I haven't seen those as much as I used to, and that's a little disappointing. Also, they're crappy brushes. And for me, I find, you know, if you can find a thicker handled brush, that's great, but I would much rather invest in a nice bristle brush because it's less frustrating when you go to make a brush stroke. If the bristles are crappy and they just start to splay everywhere, the person's not going to get a smooth line, and they're going to be frustrated and feel like they're failing when it's actually the brush that's failing them. So I do, when I get supplies for nursing homes or when I bring those in to paint, I bring high quality brushes. I have a lot of low Cornell brushes or Cotman watercolor brushes that I use, or Princeton even are fine. I very, 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 very actually never go to Michael's and get the pack of brushes for $2 because those bristles are going to be all over the place. And they're good for really big washy work. But for the stuff that I want to try to help people do, I think I try to help guide them into taking their time and maybe even learning how to do a brush stroke. It's something new to learn. Q-tips work really well. If you're going to do any bead work, make sure the beads with the large holes, or you're going to end up beading for them. And then make sure you are in tune to whether or not they're left or right-handed, or whatever hand they're going to be using. If it's a right-handed person, but their stroke is right-handed, then they're faced with figuring out how to use a left hand. And those are things you just have to try to encourage people to figure out how to get it to work. And then, as I said, again, reaching from the wheelchair out into the middle of the table is a little bit harder. So keep your workspace close to them and spread out wider. Hearing, and this is something that we pay attention to quite a bit when I'm working as a nurse, and anybody working in elder facilities are very aware of this. Anybody with hearing aids, there's a lot of echo in the room. And most of the time, people with hard of hearing are watching your lips move and watching your face, and they're gathering much of what you're saying from looking at you. And so if you turn away and start talking like this, and then you turn back to them, they just missed everything you said. So I find that getting down and looking somebody directly face to face and saying and giving an instruction, lowering my voice, it can be louder because they're hard of hearing, but sometimes a lower voice level, you don't have to raise your voice if you can lower the decibel, I guess. I don't know. I see sometimes younger people will come in, and I know my daughters sometimes will do this with grandpa. Hi, grandpa, how are you doing today? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, down, lower your voice, speak like this, lower, slower, and maybe you don't have to speak so loudly. And I think that's just because with the way older hearing is, they can hear lower levels of voices better than a high-pitched voice. Pitch, that's the word I want. Speaking very slowly and deliberately, and then allowing time for them to process what you just said or asked and respond, and before going on to the next thing. So I always kind of wait for a confirmation from the person when I'm speaking with them. And then I will demonstrate, which I'm going to do here in a little bit. And then I will say, sometimes it's just a matter of getting them to want to start. I'll say, do you want me to show you? I will start, and then I'll watch you try. And so I will start and I will do it. And then I'll hand the brush back to them and say, okay, now you try and do it. And then I wait and make them kind of try to figure it out. And then sometimes I'll give them verbal cues to, guide the steps. And then I want to have them try to do it over again before walking away and moving on to another person. And then with painting, I always ask permission. I'll demonstrate on a piece that I bring around that's like my own kind of practice piece that I can demonstrate on. Every once in a while, somebody will ask what to do on a certain part of their own piece that they're working on. And I always make sure that I ask permission before automatically just picking up my brush and going straight there and doing it for them. Because number one, it's respectful. I don't think that I would want somebody to, and I don't know, maybe people don't care, but I think it's just respectful to ask permission. It's their work, they're working on it. And I did have one woman that I asked, I said, would you like me to fill this in for you to get you started? And she said, no, then it wouldn't be mine. So I said, okay, how about I do it with a dry brush and show you where? And she said that would be fine. So just something to keep in mind. And then decision making. This was something that, depending on the level of cognitive understanding and development that that the people that you're working with have. I worked on an area at one point doing painting, and there were quite a few people there who were almost debilitated with, they were beginning dementia and could not make a decision about what color to start painting with. And I had made the mistake of putting 4 colors on the palette, or even 3 colors on the palette, like this picture that you see here on this slide, green, yellow, red, blue. And I had green, yellow, red, blue on the slide. And I went through with this person how to start, and we were going to start with the green. And I put my brush in the green and I painted on mine. And then I handed her the brush and she dipped it in the green. And then she painted a little bit on her painting. And I thought she was good to go, and I walked away. And when I came back, she hadn't done one other thing. She sat because she did not know what she was supposed to use the other colors for. She didn't know which one she should start with. It was a debilitating inability to make the decision. So I have now learned that when I come into a place for the first time and I'm meeting people for the first time, I don't know what their capabilities are going to be. So I start with one color on the palette, green, and all of my designs have green in them. That's an easy one to start with. I get it all set up. Everyone's going to paint with green to start with. And then I will add colors as that person needs them. That being said, there are sometimes, and you can find these people out right away, people who maybe used to be artists or love to paint or who are quite adept, who are starting to ask for other colors. I'll give those people as many colors as they want, but you do have to kind of be attentive to who is it capable of doing what, and really limit. It's okay to limit some of those decisions for people, eliminate them. You don't have to let them have complete freedom. Some people just aren't capable of handling that. So, and then I also keep it simple by giving one brush. Maybe I'll add a second one if they need a tiny, tiny brush. So the Bonasmallen Community Project I did in Enderlin last spring, that's this Let's Tell the Tales. And this was a fun project. This was the one that we did through COVID. And it is the tales of people from Mary Hill Manor, several people that I was able to interview, and then I drew up the storyboard. So here's how a community project would go. Let's tell the tales. So first thing I did was Zoom. I did some Zoom meetings with several residents. Those lasted maybe 20 minutes per resident, and I did 3 a night, and I did 3 nights. I think I've interviewed 9, maybe I interviewed 12, and I just asked questions, nostalgic questions about growing up tell me some stories. Tell me some stories about the house you lived in. What were the smells that you liked? What was your favorite time of year? Tell me about your holiday traditions. Did you like your family? Didn't you like your family? Were there really hard times growing up? What were some of those horrible times? What were some really good times? And as I interviewed people, I just took a ton of notes, and I discovered that there were a couple of themes. There was a lot of stories about life on the farm. There was a lot of stories about school, how to get to school, car, bus, sleigh, things that the people played with on the playground, smoking, and I almost included that in one in my paintings, like we smoked in school all the time. And then there was a lot of Saturday night dances. And so those were the three themes that I pulled out of the stories that I got. And I drew up the storyboard and put it on the canvas. So this was my sketch. I transferred it onto the canvas, and I outlined everything in a dark color. So this is what it, and then I painted all the faces that I felt people are terrified of doing faces. And so I just eliminated that decision. I just was going to take that away from people. That's something that would be an obstacle, and it would not be fun, and it would be a source of anxiety. And so I also felt like it adds uniformity if I do some things that make it look a certain way. It adds uniformity to the whole piece. So I drew it out, outlined it, did all the faces, and painted in some things that I wanted to be certain colors. And this was all the script that I had on it when I brought it in. This is what it looked like when I laid it out on the table at Mary Hill. So that's pretty sparse. I kept the painting spaces large. If you look at their clothes, I left off cuffs, I left off buttons, I left off aprons, I left off collars, I left off all the bricks on the school, I left off all the flowers, the decorative flowers I left off. That tree, that apple tree on the very kind of far left over here, not lots of individual leaves, just kind of big clumps. And then we mixed up, I had egg tempera mixed up in advance, and I met with the volunteers, and just for a couple of minutes, I thought we were going to maybe use a half an hour, but we really just kind of went through how to work the paint. And then they watched me explain to one or two of the residents how to get started. And then the volunteers then helped mimic my process as more elders came down to paint. So this was great because it was horizontally long. We could get it, it's 7 feet, rough, almost 6.5 maybe. It ran the length of the table. We got to fit several people along the table. This woman here off to the left, she agreed to paint upside down, but that was something that I didn't think of. I had thought, well, this is great. We could have people on both sides of the table, not thinking that, oh, well, then some people have to paint upside down. And while that's easy for me, that's not easy for elders. But this woman was pretty adept, and she agreed to give it a try. And so that's what this woman here on the left side is doing. And some people did very, very well. And some people here, you can see we're getting a little bit tired. And when that starts to happen, then you just pretty much say, you know what, it looks like things are starting to go, looks like you're starting to get really tired. Why don't you take a little bit of a rest? We'll let somebody else work on it for a while. So we did have to work a little bit at rotating people through. But they recognized their stories. So this is what a sample of that painting would look like. The picture on the top is what it looked like when they sat down to paint it. And then this picture on the lower left is what it looked like when the elders were done. And of course, some people were very happy with their work, and other people just said, I hate this black line, I'm not going to do it. And up they went. And I'm like, okay, no. Don't worry about it. We can take the black line off. A little rubbing alcohol is all you need to take this stuff off. And with the egg tempera, it's water. It just comes off with water. So I would help do some of the cleanups, and then we'd just start again. And then the labor intensive part on my end of it is taking it home and adding all of the embellishments and the scripts and all of the fillers. And that's what makes it look beautiful. And then when it comes back to them, that's a piece that is a final finished product that looks nice, that they've helped work on. And it's their stories. So, and part of that was just sitting and painting and telling the stories and recognizing, you know, sharing the stories. This was the Saturday night dances. So this was the piece on the left. This is what it looked like when elders had worked on it. And then how it looked after I was done doing some cleanups and embellishing. And then I added all of this subscript and all these little words and stuff like that after the fact. And don't have any of that on while the elders are working on it. It's just would gum it up too much and it would be confusing. But who didn't have a piano? You know, I guess up where we are, everybody has pianos too, but just sitting around the piano, and these are fun stories to see. And here we were painting. And that's the final piece. Okay, so I'll show you how first I think we'll do, I'll kind of show you how I prep up the little individual canvas boards. And I'll go through this slide real quickly, these little canvas board projects. The image I draw out an image and then I print it on 32-pound paper. If you do, which is like kind of a little bit heavier, smooth color copy paper. If you use regular printer paper or regular paper, it will get too bumpy, too wrinkly when it gets wet. So I cut that image out and I varnish it with a matte varnish, kind of Mod Podge style. And I tried using actual Mod Podge before, but it's too slick. There's something about the consistency, paint doesn't stick to it. It didn't work out very well for me. So I find just a matte varnish works much better. And then I rub that lightly with fine sandpaper. And then I have to make a couple of those. And one of them I have to paint in myself so that I have a color copy that we can use kind of as a guide. And then I prepare all of those, bring them into a facility, have them ready to go, and then guide elders in painting the project. And then we use acrylic paints for that, and rubbing alcohol can be used to clean up the acrylic paints if we get messy corners and things like that. So I'm going to switch over. I'm going to stop sharing right now and switch over to my camera, and bear with me just a second, because when we did the video check, it was a couple hours ago, and I'm up north pretty far and it's starting to get dark. So my lighting might change. So. Okay, so let's here first. Let me just slide this out of the way. So what I have here with me, so I'm going to just use this image right now to show how I make one of these little 5x7 canvas boards. And these are just from Dick Blick. I buy just kind of the cheapy ones. You don't need a super high quality because you're going to be doing a lot of painting on them anyway. And I have my image, and this is printed on 32-pound paper. And so what I do is I cut, I make little blocks of this and cut out the little blocks, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to cut out this piece, and I don't go like right on those black lines. I try to get a little bit close, but it doesn't have to be super picky. As I said, this is labor intensive. I usually sit in front of the TV and make my husband do this with me before I prepare a bunch of boards. So I don't want to get right up to that black line because sometimes I find that I cut the black line off and then it interferes and then the elder can't see it. So I'll cut around all of this and I will cut around all of this little boy and chicken. And then we're gonna place him on this canvas board. So just like all good cooking shows, I've done that ahead of time. So I place him where I want him. And so this again is just kind of the floral imagery that goes along with the Swedish folk art. And when I'm in a facility, you know, I run the activities for an hour and a half in the morning, maybe an hour and a half in the afternoon. The rest of the time, I'm available like in the coffee shop or in the lobby or somewhere painting. And I usually have pictures of my work and pictures of the old Swedish work and books. And I will sit and go through it with people and kind of teach people what this old art is all about. And then we kind of look for things like, we look for the story that's being told, we look for the flower images, we look for a couple of other things. And so I can kind of bring that, and then we talk about heritage and I can kind of bring that in together. So here's where I'm going to have these placed. The next thing I do is I use, the varnish I use is Liquitex acrylic. It's one of the acrylic mediums, and it's Liquitex. It's the matte varnish is what I use. And I have a brush that just looks like this, and I usually kind of keep my varnish brush with my varnish brush, and I don't really use it for anything else because they get gummed up pretty good. So it helps to just put not a ton. See if you can see this. I don't know if you can see it in the light. There we go. Can you kind of see where I'm painting now? Just a thin layer. If you get too much, it's going to start to bubble. And then set that down and go over it again. And then here, I'm going to just do the whole thing. And this is kind of like if you've ever done wallpaper, start in the center and move out. Oh, here, I must have printed this on a different printer. This is, my ink is starting to smear. So here's a lesson learned, what not to do. Don't use cheap ink. It's best if you get these printed at like your FedEx printer and not your home printer. This must be one that I did at home and didn't realize it when I stuck it in the pile because it's smearing my printer ink. So this would not be good, but I'm going to do it anyway, just so you guys can kind of see how I get that to a fix. If this were a pattern that I had printed at my FedEx, the ink would not smear like this at all. Okay, so aside from the smeared ink, essentially that's how you create the canvas board. So you would end up with one that looked like this that didn't have smeared ink. So 32-pound paper, have it printed at your local printer instead of at home. And then the Liquitex varnish. So that's how I prepare these boards. I will sometimes go so far as to make this look like there's a little bit of a finished product by adding a little bit of kind of shading patina around the edge. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I have one here where I've taken just a little bit of, maybe a little bit of raw sienna or a little raw umber paint and I've just kind of gone around the edges, you can kind of see where it's shaded. It just kind of gives it a little bit of an overall nicer, softer feel. I think I've done that on this one too. Here I've added just a little bit of shading kind of down underneath here and along the edges. And it just looks a little bit of shading in between these people. But then here again, we've got some Scandinavian imagery and the Kurbitz flower. And so this is my way of translating the way I do my artwork into an activity that is easy to do for somebody who only has about an hour and a half in them. Publish this. I can show how I do the. I just have a little bit of a paper towel that's damp. And I have just a little bit of raw sienna here and a little bit of raw umber kind of mixture. And I just have it on my damp paper towel like this. And this dries instantly. And if you don't like it, you can rub it off with rubbing alcohol. So that kind of gives it a little bit of a softer overall look, and it's a nicer product. So then once that is dry, I have these Scotch pads like this, or even a paper bag is a fine enough type of sandpaper just to rough it up. And I'll go over the whole thing just because the varnish that's on there, paint can bead up onto it if you don't rough it up a little bit. So the glossier the varnish, the worse that is. So I use a matte varnish, which will help that. So then we're ready to paint on that. So this is what I meant by having color copies too. So if I were going to sit down and paint with somebody, I would give this to the elder and ask them, you know, if this is the one they wanted to paint on. Usually I have two, you know, it's like, I've got two of these today. Which one do you want to try first? And let them pick one. Most of the time I'm painting with women, flowers are huge. So I have an entire binder full of flower designs, and those are huge. They just love the flowers. Or I've created a couple of rose mulling scroll work designs, and those are pretty fun for people to paint as well. So we start with that, and then if they choose one, then I always ask, do you want to just use whatever colors you want, or would you like something to guide you? And some people will just say, oh no, I'm fine with, you know, just what colors do you have? Show me your paint. And other people are terrified and they're like, oh no, I need a guide. I need a guide. And so I have color copies made up for them to follow along with. They have to show, know which one is which. And sometimes I think it's more helpful to have it be up and down rather than side by side. So that's something that you can show that elder both ways. Is it easier for you to look at it if it's this way, or is it easier to have you work on it if it's side by side? People visually may have a preference. And then I have green and everything, so right away their palette is going to have green on them, and we get started with the green leaves. And I do that just because it's convenient, because once I can get them started with the green leaves and maybe the next color blue, then I can move on to the next person and start helping them along. And this person can get moving. So, okay, so then I will now kind of show you what a place setting looks like when I have it I get to the activity early and get the activity room set up with the directors. And this is what the place settings all look like. Throw my apron on here too. So we're going to paint this sleigh. And this is how I have, this would be for somebody who's right-handed. So everything is pretty much right here. They are not going to have to reach far up into the middle of the table. Their water is close by. Sometimes people don't mind sharing water dishes, and so there might be a water dish in between two people, and that's fine. The palettes I use, you can use a paper plate. When I go to paint, I'm often there for 3 days, and I'll paint in the morning for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I'll paint again in the afternoon for an hour and a half. And we like to use the same palette. So I have a way to preserve acrylic paints so that they don't dry out quite so badly. And I will show you how I do that. The acrylic paints that I use for these projects are just these little craft paints, and I get whatever I can get on sale. So I have the palette, water, a couple paper towels, Q-tips to help with cleanup, and maybe with painting. Some people will choose to just go with the Q-tip instead of the brush. I have their project and a color guide if they need it or choose to have it. And then the paintbrushes I use, this is a number 6. I like either a number 6 or a number 4 round is good because you can get decent points on them. And then I have somewhat of a tiny liner to get into some of those tiny little spaces. And I also like to pay attention to brushes, what they look like on this end, because we make dots using this end of the brush. It's a good way to make little dots. So to make my palette, I just have these plastic plates, and this is a green one. I would recommend getting a lighter color. This green, I have all of these at home. I don't really use them anymore because the dark green interferes with what the colors are on the palette. So I would recommend getting a white one if you could, or light blue or light yellow, some kind of light pastel color. This dark isn't the best. And then I just have some, I use Viva paper towels, but any kind of paper towel works. I like these because they're a little thicker and heavier. And I just have them kind of cut. There's 2-3 squares here. And I have a little bit of water, and I'm gonna just pour a little bit onto my paper towel and kind of mush that in and press that in. I kind of want these not too wet, not too dry. I don't want there to be any running water. I'm gonna pour that back in. Kind of moist compress feel. And then here's the key thing that I have. I use this deli wrap. Okay, it's from Sam's Club or Costco or whatever. It's just that you get from, let me go get French fries somewhere, I guess. I have the circles cut out of this. It's not like regular wax paper. It will allow some moisture to come through. So now the surface of my deli wrap will feel moist, and it'll keep my paint moist, and they won't dry out as fast as they would if I just put the paint right on this paper plate or on this plastic plate. Acrylic paints dry out really, really fast. This way they'll stay a little bit moister. And then after, like if we paint in the morning and we're going to come back in the afternoon, some of the palettes that haven't been used very much, we can just take another one and put right on top of it. And then it's good over lunch. And then when we come back to work, we can paint in the afternoon. So the only caution I have against sitting down in the afternoon with an already used palette is to make sure that the person that's painted with it before remembers that that's their palette. If we've got memory issues, then somebody may not want to sit down at a place that looks like someone's been working there already, not remembering that it was them that they were working on. And I did that another time to somebody who didn't finish their painting in the morning and wanted to come back in the afternoon and finish it. And when I put it in front of her, she sat forever and wouldn't touch it. And eventually she said, well, I don't want to work on this one. Someone's already started it. And when I explained that that was her piece, she had no recollection of that and she wouldn't touch it. So, so those are things that just have to kind of keep in mind depending on the population you're working with. So here's how I would explain how to start with this. So I'll pretend like I'm talking with an elder. So we're going to start by having this color copy up here right in front. And why don't we start with something simple? We're going to start with these 3 green leaves. That's these green leaves right here. And we'll put some green on your palette. And I actually like to use 2 different greens because I think it's more interesting to use 2 different greens. So you can choose which one you'd like, or you can even mix the 2. This green isn't going to look green. It looks black, but it's my favorite green and it's very pretty and I'm sure you're going to like it. And I will show you how this turns into green. So this is a very, very pretty, pretty green. And it's really pretty if you mix the 2 of them together. So let's try these green leaves. Do you know which green you would like to start with? And then I usually get an answer one way or the other. Or it doesn't matter, you tell me. And so I would say, let's start with this dark green then. First, we're going to, let me find my little, first we're going to just practice making a brush stroke on my practice piece. The first thing you do is dip the brush in the water, wipe off the big goober drop, and I damp it on this paper towel to get the big drip off the end. You don't have to dry it really completely. Just dip it in the water, scrape off the drop, dab it on the paper towel, and then you only need a tiny bit of this paint, just a tiny bit on your brush, and then come over to the work area and wipe it. And now you're ready to paint. So we'll try making a brush stroke here and see what it looks like. And then I would say, notice when I dipped my brush in the paint, I did not do this, where I have it all over the brush. You don't need that. You don't need that much paint at all. You only need a little bit. So I'm going to rinse this out and go through it again. And I'll show you a tip that I use with the brush. So dab this off on a paper towel to get the drips off. You only need a little bit, little dabby dab, a little bit of dab over here in the work to spread that out on the brush. And then we're going to paint again. Whoops, now we need more paint. So let's pick up a little bit more. There we go. So notice if you stay up on the very top of your brush, you can get a skinny, skinny line. And you can paint like this, but you're not going to get very far if you start painting this way. What I would like to see you do is put some paint on your brush. I would like to see when you push that brush down, you can get that brush to flatten out if you pull it towards you. Look at how wide that can go. A little bit more water. That you can get a nice wide brush stroke. And then you're going to cover much better area and your painting will look much nicer. You'll be much happier with that. So let's try some green on our piece. And so then I would demonstrate on mine and then have them kind of try repeating it back to me. So dabby dab, a little bit of work area. So here's our green leaf up here. Here's our green leaf. And here's where we're going to paint. So we're going to go through this. We'll start with this one. No, we'll start with the end one. And I like to start at a corner and go around all the outside first and then fill in. So we're going to start with the corner, around the outside. Notice I'm not picking my brush up. I'm not doing this. And then you can just fill in with those long brush strokes. Make it all smooth. Now you can do this if you want. It just is going to look a little different. It's going to just look a little textured. And sometimes people like that, and that's fine too. But if you want it to look smooth, this is how you get that. And then I can always tell who the very precise quilters are because it translates into their painting. Very, very precise little lines. And then whenever you're done with the color, it's time to wash brush in water and pick up a new color. So there's green on the sleigh too. Should we just do all the green first or should we go with these beads? And if somebody says, let's go with the beads, then we'll add some red to their palette. And again, dip the brush in the water, dab on the paper towel, pick a little bit up of red, dab it around in a work area, and just start.
Piper, I just wanted to let you know we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, so then that is how I would proceed with the rest of the piece. And that's about all I think I've got. I have one other, let me see, I'm gonna go to, here's me. Thank you for that. Let's go here. So that's the individual canvas board project. If I'm going to do a community project, this is how I start. Same way with that Enderlin project. I create the storyboard, transfer it over to the canvas, keep the outlines dark and the spaces large. I paint in all the faces, anything else that needs to be a certain way. Keep my design clean and simple to avoid confusion. Painting day, I allow 2 or 3 elders at a time and then rotate through the piece. Try to avoid having elders paint upside down, and then bring in several small projects also. So tips: have as much prepared ahead of time. Spend about 30 minutes training the helpers. Let helpers watch the artist demo first, and then they can mimic the teaching process. Bring in 2 or 3 elders at a time and get them started, and then bring in another 2 or 3, rather than walking into a whole room full of people, because everyone's going to be really impatient and want to get going. And then it's aprons from the kitchen are great to have available. And it's fun to have coffee and snack if you're doing an afternoon activity. Just stop painting and everybody can just visit, as long as you keep the coffee away from the brush water. And sometimes during that time, it's just fun to visit or watch the artist paint. And then I thought I would include this too. You guys, I think, are going to get a recording of this, but this is kind of what a sample 4-day residency itinerary looks like when I go in. Day 1, I get there at 9, set up the activity room, and I have all the places set up just like I showed you. And I usually have a slab of green paint on, because I start with green, on all the palettes to get going, so that the work area is set up and ready to go. And then I spend the rest, painting in the afternoon. I try not to have more than 3 or 4 painting activities with residents. The rest of the time I have set up in the coffee shop or in the lobby, or we have a public showing. In Langdon, they have the 3rd graders come over during one of these painting sessions and paint with their adopted grandparents. They do activities once a month with the 3rd grade class. And that's great to do this at little individual activities, because that way the older residents can help the younger ones paint, or they can paint together. So, and this is just me. If anybody has any questions or wants to contact me at all. Did I cover everything I think I was going to?
Oh, I think so. I'm wondering if I enjoyed watching some of the attendees paint along. That was very cool. I'm wondering if there might be a question or two as we're in our final minutes here. We're getting nice chats, excellent information, and big thank yous for you, Pieper.
Sure. And if anybody wants to watch me do a demonstration of how to do an egg tempera painting, I don't know if that's ever come up with whoever's on. If you're interested in how to do that, that's what we did at Enderlin. If you look me up on YouTube right now, there's a new video that came up courtesy of, I think, Pioneer Public TV in Minnesota. It's an hour and a half. It's called, if you look up me, Pieper Bloomquist, on YouTube, it's called Scandinavian Sunday. And it's a workshop. It's an hour and a half. The first half hour is a PowerPoint. So after like minute 38, that last hour is me doing demo of egg tempera painting, old Swedish style. So that's kind of a fun thing to watch, but that's free and available.
So I'll throw it out to see if there's any comments from the cohort.
Pieper, this makes it seem so doable. I love seeing your process, and I love how you simplify it. And it really is true that people just don't have that initiating kind of thing. They need to be prompted, some of them, and realizing that's really helpful. So thanks for that.
The more you do it, the more they'll want to do it. Because when I first went up to Langdon, I had gone there to Maple Manor after having been in Mackville, which is over here on our side of the state. Mackville Nursing Home, it's part of the Nelson County. They do the Pekin Art Show, which is, the small town of Pekin is huge with artists. And that elder care facility is so engaged in artwork. I walked into that place to do a project like this. They were way ahead of the game. They were so far ahead of me. They were working on stuff before I even got out, like, okay, here's what we're going to paint today. They were already starting. I went up to Maple Manor. They were just coming on board, and everybody sat on their hands. I can't do this. Oh, I can't paint. I can't paint. I've never been able to paint. And my comment is, you have time to try something new. You probably never had a chance to know how to paint because you were working too hard putting food on the table, or getting the gardening done, or getting the kids running around, or just trying to earn money and work. People don't have time to sit and try to learn how to do things like this. Now you have an opportunity. It's just, or just watch then, or just try once. But after about the third year I went there, people remembered that I was there before. They wanted to come back. What are we going to paint? Do you have any new patterns this year?
Oh, wonderful. That's
Next
a
year
really
you come
great
back, you better have
testament.
a tractor. Next year you come back, you better have a truck. Okay, I'll
Next
bring a
year you
tractor.
need to have a green tractor. I think we need one
Yes.
of each. Yeah.
I said, I'm
Well,
making
I think,
Halloween, they're going to be yellow.
just what stands out for me, Piper, is that I have just so much going on in my mind, but the grant funds go towards supplies. So even if it's to pay for FedEx to run off high quality copies,
Yep.
And down to the brushes. So buy the high quality brushes that's going to give the most meaningful experience to the elders. And anything that can be, brought in, if it's the, sponges, the things to put around the handles to make it better and easier to hold, spend grant money on that.
Yep.
Also, the grant money goes to the artist. And Piper, you gave such a good overview of the amount of work that goes into planning. I mean, we need to pay our artists just to sit and imagine how to take their artwork to this level and to these people. And that can be paid for, just creative time to come up with the activity beforehand, before you even start, putting the pieces together for the actual activity. So the grant money is to go to the artist to help create and just spend time, bringing different ideas to the table. And also the follow-up is so lovely that you take these works that people have created and you add that embellishment that really makes it such a strong piece overall. And what a generous thing. But we need to invite our artists to think thoroughly about what they're investing and compensate them for that work. And I like that you also offered that there was trial time, that it took you a while. And that's why it's great for you to offer the tips that you've run into now. But I think we need to be welcome in all of our communities to say, we might do all the preparation in advance and we might do all the creative workarounds in advance, but some of these things just might not work out in the end, and that's okay. But what Art for Life is designed is that we do have those repeated sessions. This isn't learn how to paint once. This isn't learn how to do an activity once, but get people engaged with the idea that, there's something new and it might be something untried or untrue, but it's exciting and engaging and rewarding to come back the next time and the next time, or the next year and the next year. So I think you've just encapsulated the beauty of so many components of how we see this running in our centers. So thank you for that. Yeah. And thank you for all of you who are here. I'm so grateful how many of you are here and participated for this whole week. There'll be follow-up emails with all of you as we're moving in. And Piper, thank you for attaching your information. All of these have been recorded. So if there's something that you need to go back to and refer to that you didn't catch, that some of us might not have caught, please know that we'll let you know when those are up and available.
There is one thing that I guess I didn't, I don't know if I said it out loud, I don't remember now, but when I'm working with this little acrylic stuff, to clean up the edges, water doesn't work once it's dry. But what works on that canvas board is just plain old rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol. Do not let this get out, and don't let people know that that's your secret. Everyone's going to want to use it all the time. I keep it in a little tiny bottle in my apron. And if somebody has a painting emergency, like they dropped their brush on their canvas and oh my gosh, or I went out of the lines, I'm terribly unhappy. Painting emergency, I can come and fix it, but I don't tell them what it is. I have a magic Q-tip, and then you got to live with your mistakes, because I'm not going to go and do everybody's little thing, and I'm not going to let them do it either. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I love that.
But this is a good, it also gets it out of clothes, so too, which is an important thing if you're an activity director to know.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, we have a question. What brand of acrylics do you use?
When I paint for myself, I use Winsor Newton. That's for my own artwork, if that's the question. I use Winsor
And also for the little ones that you.
For the little ones, I like Americana. And I think I have a lot of Americana, and that's the Deco Art. And then there's another one.
Oh, while you're looking
I try not to use the super cheap, like the Apple Barrel, or whatever the really, really cheapest one is, craft paint or whatever it is, because they just don't have the pigment. They're really transparent. And so people are going to be dissatisfied because they're going to see brush strokes. It won't look like a smooth paint.
And you mentioned a place where you order supplies.
Dick Blick. I
Dick
usually
Blick.
order from Dick Blick. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a Michael's here in town, so I can get their little craft paints from Michael's. And otherwise I order everything from Dick Blick generally. With red is a tough color. I think the Americana reds are pretty good, but with the red and with the dark green, I will even go to a Liquitex soft body. The soft body is just as runny as these and has more pigment, and you get a better color. That red is so transparent. Those pigments are also transparent that they just wash. So with the red and the dark green, sap green, I'll go with the Liquitex, but otherwise I use Americana. Or Martha Stewart even, I think, has a brand that's okay, but not the really cheapish ones aren't good.
Well, it just reminds me that, the elders, they deserve good stuff, good materials, good supplies, good paper. And that just, and we have some grant funds to help make that happen. So
that's why
it's not a place to, we don't need to cut.
Yeah, that's why I like those canvases that are like a foot tall and really wide to do a small community project. I think it looks more like a real canvas, and it's a bigger and impressive project, and people feel like they're contributing more than when they're working on one of these small little things. I mean, these are fun too. Most of the time people want to make these for their grandkids. I'm going to make one for each grandkid, and that's fine. But I think a bigger community project, it's fun to participate in something bigger than yourself, and they don't get the opportunity very often.
Yeah, and that's what this is about. Sure. Yeah, well, thank you. A round of applause and reaction.
Thank you,
for
everybody.
Pieper. Beautiful work, beautiful overview. Just, so engaging. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. We done?
Yes, and thank you to each of the folks who attended. I just really excited to get to know each of you as we move into this phase of getting this into the communities and lining stuff up. I loved the presentation earlier. We're talking about the committees and how that work and the brainstorming that goes into it and the planning. So we're here to be helpful for that. Patrick, I don't know if you have some final words to close it out, or if we have any questions before I hit the end meeting button.
Well, I would just simply like to thank everybody for being here and participating, not only the presenters, but all those who are interested in becoming partners in this endeavor with us. And on that note, of course, the holidays are approaching, and we have some time off coming up here for a lot of different employees involved in this. But Annie or Rebecca, from our office, or one of us will be reaching out to you if we're not already talking to you already about especially the 3 communities that we know that we're going to want to bring online as Art for Life partner sites or pilot sites through this grant opportunity that we have, with the hope of bringing on a couple more that we've already had great conversations with within the next year after that. So in other words, if we haven't gotten a hold of you or reignited this conversation, by early January, please be sure to reach out to us, and we'll continue getting the ball rolling on getting this in your community. And happy holidays to you all.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.